In this tutorial, we will be showing you how to use the Purchase CEMA Savings Calculator for New York City, available at Hauseit.com. If you're not already on the calculator page, you can get here by visiting the Hauseit website. The spelling is at the top. Now, once you're on the website, click on the Calculators tab, navigate to the Buy menu, and scroll down to Purchase CEMA Calculator. Now, if you're on the Purchase CEMA Calculator page, it is highly likely that you're taking out a mortgage and you are buying real property. Now, real property is defined as something with a deed. So in New York City real estate lingo, it includes condos and houses. It would not include a co-op because a co-op is not real property. So that being said, if you are buying a co-op, you probably do not need to look at this calculator, but you might be interested in taking a look at your buyer closing cost calculator. That'll give you a good overview of your buyer closing costs for a co-op. They are lower for a co-op versus a condo, so figure about 2% as opposed to your more common figure of around 4% for a condo or a house in the city. You may also be interested in looking at the mansion tax calculator. Now, this applies for condos, co-ops, and houses. It doesn't matter. If the property purchase price is $1 million or more, you are in the mansion tax threshold. And one final note, you might also be interested in looking at the mortgage recording tax calculator. We will talk a little bit about this today because it is related to the Purchase CEMA calculator. But if you're looking for more granularity in regards to the mortgage recording tax element of your closing cost bill, this calculator is for you. So going back to the Purchase CEMA calculator, we want to start just by giving you an overview of what exactly is a Purchase CEMA. Now, if you go down to the glossary at the bottom of the calculator page, we have a brief overview here, but we are going to go over it with you in this tutorial. Now, the takeaway of a Purchase CEMA is that it helps lower closing costs. So beyond the specifics of how it works, what it is, what the acronym stands for, just know that if you hear the words Purchase CEMA, somebody is trying to save money on closing costs. Now, it could be a buyer or it could be a seller who brings it up, because both the buyer and the seller would save money in the event that a Purchase CEMA is successfully included in a deal. Specifically, the acronym CEMA stands for Consolidation Extension Modification Agreement. And basically what a Purchase CEMA consists of is a seller, instead of paying off their loan, they transfer the loan to a buyer who's taking out a mortgage. And because the buyer gets some of the existing loan balance, it means that the buyer's lender has to underwrite a smaller amount for the new mortgage. So it doesn't change the amount that the buyer's financing, it just changes the amount of new loan that is originated to facilitate the deal. Now, this is relevant because the mortgage recording tax for buyers is only based on the amount of new loan being underwritten. So if, for example, a buyer is taking out a $500,000 mortgage and the seller has an existing $500,000 mortgage, in theory, the seller can just assign their mortgage to the buyer and the buyer wouldn't be taking out any new loan money at all. Therefore, they would not have to pay any amount of mortgage recording tax on the deal. Now, the buyer's mortgage recording tax is one of the largest closing costs in New York City. It is 2.05% for loans below $500,000 and 2.175% for loans of $500K or more. So it is pretty substantial. Think about it this way. If you're buying a $1 million condo, you're financing 80%, you would essentially have to pay around 2% on $800,000. So by way of basic math, that is a huge amount of money. That's $16,000, give or take. So you can already probably tell that the Purchase CEMA strategy is primarily benefiting buyers. Buyers are unequivocally saving the most money using this strategy. But in order for the strategy to work, the seller has to obviously agree to it. The seller will not just assign the mortgage if they don't give their own permission, and also the lender on the seller side needs to approve it as well. Now, the seller also saves money with the Purchase CEMA. Specifically, the seller does not have to pay the New York State transfer tax on any amount of loan that they assign to the buyer. Now, the New York State transfer tax is only one component of the total transfer taxes due on a sale. The other component is the New York City specific transfer taxes, which are considerably higher. The New York State transfer tax itself is 0.4% for the majority of residential sales below 3 million. If you're selling above 3 million or exactly 3 million, your New York State transfer tax is slightly higher at 0.65%. So a seller will save 0.4% or 0.65% on any amount of loan that they assign or transfer to the buyer. So just to summarize, using a purchase CEMA, the buyer can save around 2% and the seller saves around, say, 0.5% on average. Clearly the buyer is saving way more than the seller. But it's not that simple, because the buyer can't just do it without the approval of the seller. And the seller is certainly not going to agree to something which disproportionately benefits the buyer. So as you can probably see, the seller with an existing loan has leverage. They have the ability to say yes or no when it comes to the purchase CEMA strategy. Therefore, in most occasions, the buyer and the seller come together and they more or less agree to split the total savings available using the strategy. So if the buyer is saving, say, 15K and the seller is saving 5K, the total is 20. The buyer and the seller might agree to just split it equally as a condition of getting the seller to agree to this in the first place. Now, everything is negotiable, so it may or may not always end up at that point, but it really is the case that the seller has a ton of leverage. Well, again, why would they allow the buyer to walk all over them and save all this money when the seller isn't benefiting as much as the buyer? So going back to the calculator itself, we can actually give it a shot. So let's say that the seller has an outstanding loan principal of $900,000 and the buyer is taking out a loan of $1,350,000. We can also say that the sale price is $2,250,000. Now, if you look here on the right, you'll see that the buyer's mortgage recording tax without the CEMA is around 26K, but with the purchase CEMA, it's around 8,000. So there is a savings available for the buyer on the mortgage recording tax of over $17,000. Now for the seller, they're saving less because they're only saving on the New York State transfer tax. And with the purchase CEMA, it looks like they're saving around $3,600. So in this arrangement, the total savings available is approximately 21K. So what would happen on more or less would be the buyer and seller's attorneys would get together, negotiate, and the buyer and the seller would probably both walk away from this saving around 10K. You can play around with this as well to test it out. There are some other options such as commercial real estate, and this is relevant because under commercial, the mortgage recording tax rate is higher. So the upside possibly for a purchase CEMA is larger on the mortgage recording tax side. And we also have sale price here because of the fact that, again, the transfer tax rates do depend on the sale price. So if you're above 3 million or at 3 million exactly, the transfer tax rate goes up a little bit as well. There's also a couple other options for, for a more family house. And this is relevant because of the fact that the lender will usually contribute a portion of the mortgage recording tax for your typical non-commercial deal. So they'll contribute for this, they'll contribute for this and this, but they will not contribute for commercial real estate. If you go further down here, we also have an overview of the transfer tax rates. They're also different. So if you have a commercial deal or a 4 or more family house transaction, that higher rate applies at or above 2 million as opposed to at or above 3 million for your typical residential deal consisting of condo, co-ops, as well as 1 to 3 family houses. We hope this was helpful. If you have questions, leave us a comment below the video and feel free to email us, give us a call, or send us a text if you are interested in learning more about what we can offer you in terms of helping you save money as a buyer or a seller here in New York City.